Hello, and welcome back to Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast, where we explore the ongoing journey of recovery and the spiritual growth that comes with it. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hey everyone, it's Paul from Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast with a quick note before we get started with this episode. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for an entire year now. It's been such an amazing experience getting to know everybody. We already have the majority of 2026 booked up and we have a lot of great guests scheduled. We don't make any money off YouTube or any of the other platforms. This podcast is completely self-supporting and we've spent a lot of money, time, and energy into it simply just because we love doing it. We're not trying to make a profit, but we are trying to cover our upcoming expenses if that's at all possible. If you'd like to be a part of that, you can make a contribution at our Venmo, which is Recovery Recordings 615. We'd like to keep this commercial free. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast. I'm your host, Paul. Today is March 4th, 2026, and this is episode 106. You can find us on Facebook. We have a private Facebook account, which is Three Legacies Recovery Recordings Podcast. Get on there and send us a request, and we'd love to add you to the page. You can also find us on Audible, Spotify, iHeartRadio, several other major platforms. Our email address is recoveryrecordings615, that's plural, recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. And we got a lot of cool stuff coming up. This upcoming weekend, I know usually y'all are probably used to having me post stuff on the weekends, usually Sunday nights, but this week I'm going to be out of town. I'm going down to Florida and recording a men's retreat, and so I plan on, if everything turns out okay, I plan on posting that. So that's the game plan. It's going to be Bob B from Minnesota and Jack W from Colorado, and the two of them are going to do a men's retreat down in Florida. I'm going to go down there and record it, so super excited about that. Then the following Friday, which is going to be March 13th, we're going to have Mitch W from Mount Juliet, Tennessee, and Jeremy N from Cookeville, Tennessee, and we're going to call that episode Seeking New Management, A Spiritual Shift in Life, and I'm excited about that. And let's see, my prayer today is that something spoken here touches someone's heart, draws them closer to the Spirit, and helps them receive strength needed to keep moving forward towards healing, hope, and renewal. And tonight's guest, we have Tom U from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and David H from Broomsville, Colorado. How's it going, guys?
Doing well, thank you, Paul.
Doing good, Paul.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. This has been an episode I've been waiting on for a while. I got the two OGs in the house with me, right? Yeah. Part of that Denver crew, right? And yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how long have you guys met? David, you want to start? How long ago?
Yeah, sure. Tom and I met at the first. I can mark it because it was the first Fellowship of the Spirit conference, which was 1993 in Breckenridge, Colorado. And we just became friends through that conference. And we both, I think, were being sponsored maybe at that. No, you were sponsored by Mary, but we both had a very tight relationship with a guy named Don P. and just love that guy. And he was my sponsor at that time. And so we had this nice connection, but we go back a long way. And Tom and I, we don't talk but a couple of times a year and then for hours when we're at Fellowship of the Spirit together. But it's always been a very close relationship for me. And I just felt like I can slip back in and talk principles over personalities with Tom, and I love him to death. So it's real great experience for me to be here with him.
Nice, yeah. I'm hoping I get to hear some of those Fellowship of the Spirit stories during this conversation. Tom, talk to us.
Okay, well, what David never talks about is the fact that about 3 years after we met, I went out of I lost my marbles. I completely went crazy and was on the verge of drinking or killing somebody. And David saved my life. He really did. And it's we throw that around a lot. We say that a lot, but I mean, there. If you look back and you really are honest, you can see these times where it was divine intervention, no doubt, but where someone and what they did saved your life. Like the first guys that 12-stepped me when I was in the treatment center, same thing. Without them, I wouldn't have lived. I would have drank after I got out of there. Anyway, David was completely honest with me. I fist stepped some stuff with him, and some of the step work we do, it gets a little intellectual and kind of drawn out and stuff like that. And we like to go deep and all that. But this wasn't like that. This was like critical care. Like, I'm going to drink or I'm going to fucking blow somebody's brains out. And David just told it like it was, man. He didn't cut he wasn't mean. He was truthful. And Don taught us something. I've been thinking about this quite a bit because I was at a meeting Monday night there was a drunk there, and one of my home group members was really rude to this guy, and he didn't have to be, and he chased the guy out of. The guy was not belligerent or anything; he was just mumbling and stuff, and this guy had a hair up his butt, and he yelled at the guy like, have respect for our meeting, and blah blah blah. And it reminded me of something that Don taught us, and he said, honesty without love is just cruelty, and confrontation without a real solution is just brutality. You know, and so that's what I got. And what David did with me was just pure love, man. And he didn't cut any corners. He didn't soften the blow, but it came from love, and so I could hear it. And if I couldn't have heard it, I don't know what the hell would have happened. I mean, I nearly had a fist fight with two men during that time, and I was just out of my gourd, man. It was a bad deal. And my wife's aunt had shot my dog, and my dog was a sweet dog that protected all of us. And I just went out of my mind. I was 9 years sober. And Mary Thayer had warned me about 9 years. She said, that's a rough time, man. You gotta be extra careful at 9 years. And I thought, yeah, for people who don't go to FOTS and don't work the steps, that's probably true. Not for me though.
Yeah.
And oh man, did it hit hard. And I saw that bottle of Jack Daniels floating on the horizon. Anyway, so I've thanked him many times for that. And I don't mean to embarrass you, David, but you know how much that meant to me. So I wanted to feel that. So we've known each other a long time. We've done a lot of stuff together. And we have a lot of mutual friends, and we love the same kind of music, and we've just had a real, great relationship. He's one of my best friends in the world. So there's that.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. For the listeners, I have had Tom and David both on the podcast in the past. I'm trying to look up. Let's see. Me and David did we did an episode called. Hold on one second. We called it. It's called Self-Examination, Prayer, and Meditation, an Unshakable Foundation. And that was episode 66. And we did that back in September 10th of last year. And I've had Tom on the show. This is probably I think this is your third time on here, Tom. I've had you on here a couple times. I'll find out what those episodes were. But
I was on with Justin one time.
yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah, I remember that. Let me see, Tom. Let's see. We did two episodes. One of them was episode 74, and that was October 7th, 2025. That was with Justin H. in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and that was Entered the World of the Spirit. And then we also did, the first one was June 1st, 2025, episode 36. That was called "We Had to Quit Playing God. It Didn't Work." So y'all can go back and check out check out those episodes. But yeah, man. So I just appreciate the two of y'all getting on here. And so tonight's episode is called "The Spiritual Life Is Not a Theory. Practice, practice, practice." And we have briefly, just a handful of times over text, talked about possible avenues of approach with this whole thing, and we decided we're going to let God do God stuff, and we're just here to be vessels. And David, talk. What comes to mind really whenever you think of the spiritual life? It's not a theory.
The fact that the rest of that sentence is we have to live it tells me that there's going to be some action required on my part if I want to live this spiritual life. It's not a theory. It's not something we think about. It's something we practice and we do. And it's the result of that practice that leads us, I think, to this awakening, this spiritual life, this being rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence, and this conscious contact that we talk about. And I believe that more than I ever have. I mean, as there's a place in the book 12 Steps and 12 Traditions where Bill says we should be working these steps every day in our lives. I think it's on step 12. And it's like, what are you talking about? I got enough stuff going on. But at some point, it just begins to be part of how we live, and so it just takes conscious awareness. But in case we miss it, we have this practice of self-examination. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. And I go, oh man, I got all caught up in stuff that had nothing to do with me. So I love the title and I love the subtitle. Practice, practice, practice.
All sorts of stuff, just from what we talked about, in the beginning. I don't even know how to put this. I've gone through some changes, probably because I have these oncologists that want to remind me that what I have is going to kill me. And so, and I don't know that they're right. I really don't know that they're right, but it gives you pause when you hear that. I mean, like they don't want to, I don't want to give you false hope. Well, why not? How could it hurt? Give me a little hope, whether it's false or not.
Yeah.
But I'm really doing good. And people say to me, well, I guess you have to live a day at a time now. And I go, shit, I've been trying that for 39 and a half years.
Yeah.
And so that's nothing new. But something has shifted lately, and it's this thing of, because I've been harping on this for a long time. Like I've done this men's retreat 4 times, and it's called "We Had to Quit Playing God Because It Didn't Work," and "The Spiritual Life's Not a Theory. We Have to Live It." And each time I do it, it's a little bit different. And I've got 2 more of these coming up. I'm doing one with Mike M up in Cedar Rapids, and I'm doing one by myself out in Oregon in March, I guess. And the one in Cedar Rapids is in April. But so each time I do it, I learn more, and half the time I wonder if it's not to teach myself stuff. Don said a thing to me one time. He said, I say he said it to me. I might have been at one of his workshops or one of his talks, but he said, you should listen very carefully to what's said at AA meetings. But you should listen even more carefully to what you say, because that's what you need to learn. And I thought, isn't that interesting? I must need to learn a lot because I talk at every damn AA meeting I go to. But anyway, but the thing I was getting to is that I've kind of stopped judging myself, not completely, but pretty much, it's like I've done some things that before I would beat the hell out of myself for, and I just go, isn't that kind of playing God? You know what I mean? It's like, my emphasis was always on we had to quit playing God, meaning we had to quit judging other people, you know. But am I not part of the equation? You know what I'm saying? And so I've really cut myself some slack in that way, you know. And sometimes I feel a little guilty about it, you know. I feel like, man, you better stay on the ball. You better stay, you better be vigilant with yourself and all that. And I just don't want to play God in any way, shape, or form anymore. I honestly don't. And I talk about this all the time that I realized, and this was back when the emotional sobriety workshop was going on, when Sam did it. And there's this wonderful Al-Anon out of Cincinnati, Kathy H. And we just love her, man. And she's a very wise woman. She's got 43 years in Al-Anon, but she's my age, and we were born in the same year. Anyway, during the talk she gave, she kept saying, the God of my experience, woof, 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 and then the God of my experience, blah, 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 instead of the God of my understanding, which you hear people say at meetings. And, what hit both me and Juanita at the time was, isn't that the deal? Isn't that the deal? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand God. I mean, I understand God less now than I thought I did 25, 30 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And I'm really good with that. Like the Navajos have an expression, the great mystery. And that gives me comfort, that expression. I like that. So and then page 46, I quote this all the time. Page 46 says none of us could fully define or comprehend that power, capital P, which is God. And Don used to talk about that. He'd say the big book doesn't say we worship God. It says we worship that power, capital P, or depend on God, depend on that power. So don't get hung up on the word God. Capital P is what we're really after, because that's what we lack, and that's what we're seekers. But so I can't define it. I can't give you a proper name for it, and I can't comprehend it. I can't understand it. Right? Does that leave me with nothing? No, it leaves me with almost 40 years of experience of depending on a power that I can't see, and that in the beginning I didn't believe existed. And then after I stayed sober a while, I believed it existed, but I didn't believe it had the muscle to like take care of my money and my sex life and a lot of other my interactions with humans on planet Earth. I didn't think it had that much muscle. But little by slow, when I'd put myself into a trick and I'd have to say, God, please help me, I would have an experience of the power carrying me through. And it happened over and over. And I've got dozens of examples of that. We call it evidence. But at any rate, so what that's led me to is I have this kind of a quiet but really profound belief that something always cared about me, was always trying to carry me through this existence, this journey of life. Even way before I drank and during my drinking years, because I was suicidal basically in my drinking years. I never would have said that, but if you watched me, objectively, you say, this cat's trying to kill himself, man. Stuff he's doing. David and I have very similar backgrounds with that crap. But anyway, so something carried me through that, and it's carried me through 40 years of sobriety, And so I just, it's not even like believe, it's like knowing, like Carl Jung was asked at one point by some interviewers that said, Dr. Jung, based on things you've said and things that you've written, it would lead a person to the conclusion that you, a man of science, believe in God. And what Jung said was interesting. He said, belief in God. He goes, no, I do not believe in God. That would require a leap of faith. I know God. There's a difference. And that hit when I saw that in a documentary when I was first sober, and it hit me hard, and it still does, you know. And of course, without Jung, there might not be any AA, you know. So, I mean, that's the thing, man. I've lightened up with a lot of stuff, you know. Should I continue this? I'm kind of on a roll, and I told David to go first. Now I'm kind of going first. Um, I'll illustrate this. Monday night at my home group here, it's called the East Side Men's Stag, and we had moved to a new location. The church we were in for 11 years got sold, and we moved to a new church, and we're so we're all kind of in a different space. I mean, a lot of us have gone to that meeting for 11 years, and there was a guy I was supposed to meet up with because a guy in Santa Fe. I'm in Nashville, by the way. If this is confusing, I'm not in Santa Fe. And a guy I was supposed to meet up with because a friend in Nashville or a friend in Santa Fe had asked me to meet with his good buddy in Nashville who had just gotten out of treatment at Cumberland Heights and was supposed to go to 90 and 90, and could I help him? And I said, definitely, and I reached out to the guy and stuff. I didn't hear back. And Monday night, he staggered into our home group, and he was obviously had been drinking and was also not doing real well physically anyway, like even if he wasn't drinking. And anyway, it's complicated, but he had a share because he picked a ticket that we picked tickets at that deal. And then they call out the tickets, and if you're the first ticket, you set the stage for the rest of the sharing. You pick the topic, and why God would have done this is beyond or whatever did it. But this guy, the drunk guy, got the first ticket. He'd never been to that meeting. And they said, "Oh, he said, well, I've got those numbers." And they go, "Well, you've got it, you know." And he goes, "I'm the winner, winner, chicken dinner," right? And he starts off like that, and then he goes into a long thing about his frustration with the Bank of America and stuff. Anyway, we're not supposed to share what we heard at meetings. I do it all the time. I have to apologize, but anyway, and we finally had to clap him down, because he was on a roll. But glad that he was there, right? And so during the course of the thing, he mumbled a little bit, like he'd go, while other people were sharing. And this one guy teed off on him like crazy, man. He was like, you don't do that in an AA meeting. Have some respect for our meeting. And he wasn't disruptive. You guys know what I'm talking about. When a drunk comes in the meeting, man, we're glad he's there. We're glad. I mean, it's not easy to make it to a nighttime AA meeting when you've been drinking. You know what I mean? And those guys are my heroes. Anyway, so and then later he mumbled something, and the guy got on him even more ferociously. And finally he said, "Well, that's all right. I'll just leave." And he walked out. Where a couple of the members followed him, and they 12-stepped him, in another room and stuff. But back in the day, I would have found it necessary to jump that guy's ass that jumped the drunk. You see, I was part of the AA police, and I didn't find it necessary at all. I thought, God's got this. A bunch of other people talked to him, but I didn't find it necessary to play that role anymore. And it felt good. I mean, I thought, well, do you not care about this situation? And I thought, no, I care about it, but it's not my business. It's not for me to correct it. And, years ago, I'd hear somebody say in a meeting, and then I looked at my part, or I did some inventory and I found my part. And that was just like fingernails on a blackboard because it bothered Don a lot, right? And, I'll hear it now and I think, well, I know what they're talking about. They're trying to see where they were wrong. They're using the wrong words, but they're trying to see where they were wrong. And I don't have to talk to them after the meeting and correct them like I used to. And God, it's just like a load off my shoulders, And anyway, and the other thing, the book says we cease fighting anything or anyone. well, how about myself? How about he's fighting me? Because when I'm fighting me, I'm fighting anyone or anything. I'm playing God. You know, if God is God and I'm me, I don't have to fight anything. I just don't have to. That's not to say I don't have opinions and I don't take stands, but fighting I don't have to do, right? And I don't have to fight with myself. So just all the conflict that I used to have about, oh, you screwed this up, you got to fix that. Oh, you did, it's just I've got a lighter touch anymore, man. I don't have to play police. I don't have to correct people. If Don Major was a friend of mine, and he was a very wise guy, and he used to say, advice that's not asked for is just criticism.
Yeah.
And I try to hold on to that,
Yeah.
And I mean, unless somebody is just really out there and hurting the meeting, I might say something, but I just don't have to do that anymore. And the last thing, and really it is the last thing, because I'm fried. Um, uh, Two of my really dear friends. Well, one's a dear friend, and the other is a friend in AA. They're both speakers. They're people I've known for quite a long time, like at least 20 years. Both of them 20, and one I've known him over 25. And they both said to me within a 3 or 4 month period, this last year, they said, I don't do mechanics, is what they said to me. And I should have asked them, like, what do you mean by that? I wished I had, actually. I probably should call them up and ask them, but it's not worth it. But I thought to myself, well, I do mechanics if it's called for. I was talking to Juanita about this, like, what do you think about it? And she said, well, I think you and I both do mechanics, but what Don taught us was it's not cookie cutter, okay? That we don't take the spirit out of the step work by forcing everyone into a mold that they have to do the same thing. And I was guilty of that originally, So I kind of let them find their own way with it, but I'll guide them. And we use the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what we use, and I'll guide them. But we both, there's revelations for both of us as we go through the thing. And so I guess I do mechanics, but I don't do cookie cutter, and I don't, mechanics saved my life, literally saved my life. Before that I was just adrift, and then it grounded me, and it gave me a direction and a way to do this. So I don't know if any of that made sense, but that's kind of where I'm at today. I've got a much lighter touch, even with myself. I just don't hold my feet to the fire like I used to, and it feels good. It feels really good. Anyway. That's all I got. Thank you, guys.
That's great. Appreciate it, Tom. I tell you, I do mechanic. I do all of it. that's I do anything that, every bit of it. Right. I went through phases where I was even cookie cutter for a minute, and I realized, like, oh, okay, that's not it. But I love, like, the idea of, like, going through the step process and having an experience with the steps, right? Because when we were at Discovery Place last week, actually, I think I'd shared this with you, but I heard Don on one of his talks when he was talking about the sex conduct. He was like, we're not to be the arbiter of anybody's sex conduct, not even our own. He was like, we're going to let God do that. You go through that process, and, like, at the end of that, you're like, oh, wow, okay. God reveals stuff to you through putting that work in, right? It's like, oh, wow. It's like, what are the ideals? Clearly, everything I just wrote down, the opposite of that is what my sane and sex ideals are. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and he does that. It's like God will do that shift during the process. But yeah, I love that. Talk to us, David.
Yeah. Oh man, Tom, you touched on so much stuff there, and it really, one of the things I really got out of that, and while you were talking, I was thinking also about how does my experience relate to what you're talking about there, and very, very similar. And one of the things that's come to me, I had cancer 3 years ago. I just and 2 years ago they came back and gave me surgery, and And so that really changed my prayer and meditation. It also really deepened my sense of the practice of the presence of God, that there was actually a power in there. And I remember a specific event. The doctor diagnosed me. He said, "You got a tumor on your tongue." And my first thought was to be angry at him for giving me that news. And this was like 3.5 years ago, maybe. And then it was followed by a thought that, oh, God, thank you. You allowed me to get 38 years of sobriety before this one got laid on me. And I know that you're going to watch after me no matter what happens. And it was like, who is talking there? But there was a big shift in consciousness. My wife and I recently read a book by Roman Catholic priest Richard Rohr. I love his writings. He's very spiritual. He has a center for action and contemplation down in New Mexico, and he focuses on the spirituality of his church. But the book is called Falling Upward, and it's
Nice.
about the second half of life. And one of the things is, he says, in the second half of life, we are naturally drawn more to that power, which is also seeking us. We're just natural. And he said many older people will experience whole new levels of being changed and being awakened and seeing the reality of what this relationship is, and that it's always been there and it will never go anywhere. And I believe Bill Wilson had exactly the same intuition. He said, that's why he says when we write inventory, that's why self-examination is so important. He says, bottles aren't your problem. Drink is not your problem. Dope's not your problem. They're just a symptom of what's wrong with you. You don't feel whole. You don't feel safe. You don't feel esteemed. Nothing ever goes your way. You want. You never get it. And so we use, or that was my solution. Some people gamble. Some people are just miserable. Some people have depression. Some people are sex addicts, and they're trying to fill that thing up. And so we write inventory. We have to find the things that have been blocking us. Blocking us from what, Bill Wilson? From the great reality deep down within. You're separated from that power that's always been inside you. This is what I believe today. I used to tell my sponsor, I'm so afraid to trust God because I'm afraid just when I get somewhere, which usually meant a whole bunch of money or the girl or whatever it was that I got, that he's going to drop me on my head the next day. I no longer feel like that. I don't have that concept of God. I have a belief that I read this in another big book, and I thought, no, that's the way I want to live. That's the way I want to move my life towards. God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God, and God in him. And man, it don't get no more simple than that. This power I seek is seeking me. And this stuff became aware, and it made self-examination so much more important. And it also cleared something up for me about living the spiritual life instead of discussing it, instead of trying to understand what is the spiritual life. And that is that when I think Bill Wilson, the way he lays out, or the way we have come to lay out 4-column inventory for resentments, what is the third column, which is, well, what's threatened? When Mr. Smith does something or other, well, it threatens my self-esteem. Why? He's trying to take advantage of me. He thinks I'm a sucker. It threatens my security. I don't feel safe. I want to keep my wife. He's trying to get to her. And so I see those things. Those are instincts. And Bill goes a lot further in this whole idea about instinctual needs or demands that we have. We demand the outside world give us what we need so we can feel safe, secure, and happy. And I've
Sure.
begun to really understand when I'm connected, when I'm in presence, when I see though I allow those things in step 6 and 7 to be removed, which have separated me, that then there's a clear channel. And so what I've found is, thank God, whatever that is, that I stayed around. I'm 73 years old now, been sober 41 years. I always had a pretty optimistic outlook. I don't know how that happened. It doesn't happen to everybody. And just being sober was a whole new life, and I loved it. But I continued to hold back from that whole idea of surrendering entirely. And I would hear other people talk about it, and they would talk about the miracle of actually surrendering and the things that happened to them when they did that. And my heart would say, go, go, go. But my ego, my brain would say, whoa, 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 slow down. It might have worked for him, but it probably won't work for you, or whatever. And just the fact that I think because I stayed here, because I continued to work, that I've reached, something else has happened where I've begun to understand God never wanted to judge me. God never wanted to criticize me. Exactly what Tom was saying. Can you offer compassion to yourself? And I've also got a whole nother idea about surrender. My sponsor is a guy named Mickey now. He's been my sponsor for over about 33 years now. But one day I was complaining about something, and he said, Dave, when you took your third step, which is we surrender, we offer ourselves up for God to do with us as he wants to do, you may not have been sincere. You may not have been ready to do that, but God was very sincere.
Mm.
He's going to give you exactly what you asked for.
Mm.
And I've had kind of a sideway thinking about that. Oh, then that means whatever comes to me is what God wills for me. And it's not about whether it makes me feel good or not, or what I prefer. It's about this is one more opportunity for me to live in God's presence with cancer, with somebody yelling and screaming at me when they were the one that turned left again on a red light. Whatever it is, or the woman with 15 items in a 10-item lane. And it's about, can I trust and rely on you in this situation, God? Can I live on that different basis of trusting and relying instead of trying to fix, manage, and control either them so that it accommodates me, or to rationalize, well, she probably didn't know what she was doing. How about you just practice that principle of love and tolerance for others, Dave? God's taking care of you. You don't need to worry about her groceries. And the benefit, two things happened. I just stayed working these steps every day. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. Not even close, not even close. But I stayed in there. I kept myself busy. And then when I retired and when COVID came along, I started sponsoring more people. I started going to meetings with 30-something years of sobriety. I started going to more. Now I love them. There's no place I'd rather be on earth than hanging around with these people, because these are people that are trying to just stumble towards this awakening, stumble towards this power that we seek, so that we can live in harmony. And oh man, it just changes. And then you reach old age. And if Richard Rohr's right, you begin to be drawn to that stuff like never before. And I'm just so grateful that I made it, that I was able to be in this deal and surrounded by these people. But I got to tell you, I still get irritated all the time. And as they say, we got a step for that too, and if I ride it, it it puts it in its proper perspective. Hey, you just got scared, Dave. You didn't like the and you felt threatened at the level of self-esteem. Had a little bit of fear in that. They don't like you. Threatened at the level of security. Oh, I'm not safe. I'm kind of scared. You can't say those words around me. You can't talk to me like that. Oh my God, mom told me when I was a little kid, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words aren't gonna hurt you. But somewhere down the line, I didn't get that. I go, you can't talk to me like that. Hey, too late. They already did. You better learn to pull God into this instead of trying to change what's already happened. It's insanity to think that I can change. And yet I spend massive amounts of time back there and I'm getting better. I got trained in meditation a number of years ago. In fact, in February, 39 years ago, went to work for a guy. He said, "Stay here, and I'll get you trained." And so I meditate twice a day. When I got cancer, I couldn't sleep at night, so I'd meditate all through the night. Oh my God, who knew cancer was going to bring this beautiful gift to me? And that's kind of continued since I've gotten better. But the point is, the more I meditate, why do you keep on doing it? I believe I've found this power, and I like just sitting there in the silence. Bill Wilson said, sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. We found the great reality deep down within. And I believe I've found it, and it's silent. That's what it is for me.
Sure.
It's not even a concept. It's a knowing that, in that silence, when there's nothing there,
Yeah.
I'm totally present. So anyway, so much of this is luck for me. Yes, I had great sponsorship. Thank you, God, for that. And yes, I stayed active, but so much was luck. Why yes? Why did I say yes instead of no? I don't know. But here I am, and the longer I stay here, it seems like, I still have the same problems and selfishness, self-centeredness. That's the root of my troubles. I mean, if I'm thinking about me, I'm creating my own troubles. Leave it alone, Dave. And that's one of the great things that meditation has taught me. Just because you have a thought and become aware of it, you don't have to hang on to it.
Thank God.
Yeah. That's right. You're thinking the right person too. Anyway, that's kind of how it's looking now, and that's what I think. Part of what was meant by that great line: the spiritual life's not a theory. You can't talk about it. I mean, you can talk about it all you want. Compare notes with all your friends, but we have to live it, and that requires, I think, for me, is an emphasis on spiritual growth requires practical daily application of these principles. And so, do I do it perfectly? Not a chance. But with practice, I think I'm getting better.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's goes into what Tom last week when we were talking about Don M saying it's either self or God. Self or God, right? It's either self or God. You really can't even can't go into this without touching on step 3 where you start seeing like just all the different ways self shows up. Me and KDP was we did a whole series on here, and she was talking about, she was like, I hate it whenever I got to do a conference with somebody and I'm given to speak an hour on 6 and 7, and then the person that goes through 3, it talks on 3, just talks about like saying the 3rd step prayer, but don't give you any kind of meat to hang on to. You get what I mean? So when you get into that 3rd step and you start seeing all the different ways self shows up and how it's just not productive and it's pretty destructive, you start seeing like, wow, it makes 6 and 7 have like a whole new light, right? And you don't know any of that stuff until you know it, you know? So yeah, it's self for God, right? And, I remember me and Tom I did a fifth step with Tom, probably, I don't know, 3-4 years ago or something. And, we were talking about meditation and resting in the presence of God, you know, resting in God. And, Tom, talk to us.
Well, man, my mind goes down bunny trails. I had something great that David had tweaked in me, and now I've completely forgotten it. But that story, the self or God story, was one that Don Major told, and there was a guy, and David, you probably heard of this guy, Cherry Carpenter. He was in Nashville and kind of an icon, kind of a hard ass, I guess. I know there's people here I know who knew him, were in his lineage and stuff. But anyway, Don Major couldn't get sober, and he had been, I mean, he just was incorrigible and, unsponsorable, and got kicked out of the 202 Club 3 times, twice for passing out in meetings and once for shooting dope in their bathroom. And I mean, my kind of guy, absolutely my kind of guy. And I liked Don a lot. I thought he was a very wise individual, and we're both from the same area of Southwest Kentucky. Anyway, he was destroyed. He hit a tree at 140 or something, no seatbelt. And anyway, so he was in a lot of pain always, and he had lost all his money. He'd lost his license to practice law, and he'd lost, everything. His daughter wouldn't talk to him for years. And he ran away from his reputation in Louisville, came to Nashville, and was, knocking around and telling people he wanted to get sober. And they said, "You got to talk to Cherry." And so the story that he told, and I heard him tell this in Midland, Texas, and he said that he'd call up and talk to Cherry, and he'd go, "Cherry, I don't think I'm going to make it, man. I'm destroyed, man. Everything on my body hurts. I mean, all these broken bones are still killing me, and the surgeries I've had still killing me, and I live in this horrible, like, attic apartment, just a shithole, and I never have lived like this, Cherry, and I don't have any money. I don't have enough money to buy a pack of smokes." And he goes, Cherry'd say, "Well, Don, it's either self or it's God." Click. And he'd call him the next night. He said, "God, Cherry, it's worse than it was, man. It's just, I don't think I'm going to make it. Everything hurts, and no money, and living in this horrible place, and blah, blah, blah." "Well, Don, it's either self or it's God." Click. And, and I heard that. I mean, I heard it because I went and asked him how he got over hepatitis C, and would you please tell me? And he said he would. And when I came down to talk to him that afternoon, he said, "You want to talk to me about hepatitis C?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "Well, Tom, with hepatitis C, it's either self or it's God." Oh my God, was my mouth open for that, But you hear these Cherry Carpenter stories in Nashville and stuff. But the thing that made me think of was these guys, everybody in Cherry's lineage, you'd say, "Hey, George, how you doing?" "Just right." And there's people still in Nashville that you ask them how they're doing, they say, "Just right." That's what they answer. And when I asked this guy, I said, "Well, why do you always say just right?" He goes, "Well, that's the way it is, so it's just right." And I've thought about that a lot, and how can you argue with that, really? I mean, you can. The ego will scream at that, but the spirit can't argue with that. It's like it's just right. It's the way it is, and it's just right. And they said when Cherry was dying, and he was in Vanderbilt Hospital, he was dying. He knew he was dying, and my friend went to see him. He said, "Cherry, how you doing with this dying thing?" And he goes, "Just right." you know and that's a really good attitude to have. It's one I'm kind of leaning into more and more. And I don't know. And David was talking about it with meditation. Here's a Don Pritt story that I like. We're out in Lubbock, Texas, probably 30 years ago, and Don's doing a workshop, and it was in a weird place. It was David knew these people. They were like a couple that had a shelter for older men and stuff. It was a weird thing. And Don was, had known them, and they invited him to Lubbock and flew him out there. Anyway, he was doing this workshop, and they got to the 11th step, and there was, for some reason, a 19-year-old kid was there, right? And he sharing, and he says, I can't meditate. I have a monkey mind, and it just goes crazy, and I just can't meditate, and I'm not a meditator, and I just don't think that's for me. That's not in the cards for me. And Don said, well, can I ask you something? He said, yeah. He says, did you ever play any sports? And he said, yeah, I did. I played some sports. He said, were you any good at any of them? He said, well, I was a really good soccer player. And Don goes, well, the first time you went out and kicked a soccer ball, were you good? And he said, no, I sucked. And Don said, uh-huh. And so, but you said you were a good soccer player. How'd you get to be a good soccer player? And he said, well, I practiced. And Don said, exactly. He said, whatever you practice, you get better at. You practice stealing, you'll become a better thief. You practice lying, you'll become a better liar. You practice meditating, you'll become a better meditator. And I've never forgotten that. And, I think that's true. But anyway, what's been so important for me in the last 2 or 3 years is the part of the 10th step. I sent you that book, David, the Unpopular Studies of the 10th Step. And I did half of it I completely disagreed with, but half of it I really liked. And one of the things that they talk about is that it says, there's things that it gives us direction in the 10th step. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking, and fear. When these crop up, because they will, because we're human, we ask God at once to remove them. We talk to someone immediately, it says, which I don't think you always need to do that. But in our day and age, if you want to follow that, there's no reason not to, because we have speed dial on cell phones. Bill and Bob must have had a little problem with that, right? The immediately part. Yeah. Unless they talked to the cab driver. I don't know what the hell they did, But so talk to someone immediately, make amends promptly if you've harmed someone. And I think that by talking to someone, because a lot of times I'll think I didn't harm someone, and then who I'm talking to says, well, if you'd done it to me, I'd have been harmed, like that. And then resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. And we always say this, it doesn't say run out and find the little sisters of the poor and volunteer that night, right? It says just think about somebody else instead of yourself. That in and of itself is a hell of a balm. And it might be that you think, well, I need to give them a call. I hadn't thought of them in a long time. Or they were really hurting. Maybe I can do this and this. But whatever it is, it gets me off of me. But the point that they kept making in this book was it doesn't say listen, continue to listen. It says continue to watch. And the watcher, that observer, that part that I can develop, it's like a muscle that I can develop, is able to watch my thoughts and not engage with them and just go, interesting. That kind of very interesting, total bullshit, but very interesting, And so the antithesis of watching is listening. And when I'm listening, it's like, well, that's right. That bitch did talk to me like that. How dare she? Doesn't she know who I am? And on and on and on like that. And when I'm listening, I'm caught in the vortex of it. I'm swept downward with it. But when I'm watching, I'm able to keep my objectivity. And what a tool that is, what a tool. Father Tom Weston, you ought to get him on here sometime. I've learned a lot from him over the years. And he said this thing, it sounded so simple. He said, I fall asleep spiritually. And I know I fall asleep spiritually because I wake up spiritually, And I think that's I've never met anyone in AA who didn't have that, experience of falling asleep, waking up, falling asleep, waking up, And then the very last thing I think that Bill Wilson gave us a mantra in the 11th step. And, I've been big on Lakota Way over the years and Sweat Lodge and all that. I'm not sharing anything that I haven't shared many, many times recently, even. So I hate to, bore anyone with this. But anyway, in the Sweat Lodge, we talk about the unseen world. And I love that idea, the unseen world. And so Bill Wilson saying many times each day, thy will be done. And the kicker is, how many is many? Could it be constant? Could it be constant? Could it be, like once an hour? David used to set an alarm on his clock. I don't know if you still do that, David, but and it would go off, and he would say, "Thy will be done." Right? Isn't that kind of what you did? Right. So if I do that, if that becomes my mantra, "Thy will be done." Oh, I'm tweaking. Thy will be done. Whatever it is, once an hour, thy will be done. What it does is it constantly reminds me about the unseen world, and that what I'm dealing with right here is not all there is. In fact, this is the veil, right? This is the the untrue. And it hit me like, look what Wilson did. He gave us this mantra to remind us of that all day long, saying many times each day, thy will be done. Anyway, it's good stuff.
Thy kingdom come, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff. David, what comes to mind, buddy?
One last thing, Tom, you brought up, and I've really had kind of a observation of this over the last couple of years, and that is that 100% agree with you. A lot of third step meetings, what's talked about usually, I shouldn't say all that's talked about, but what's talked about usually is that third step prayer, turning our will and our lives over to the care of God. And yet the text on that is all about getting rid of selfishness. Mm-hmm. And the surrender, the third step prayer should be inevitable if we buy the 2.5 pages prior to that, where he talks about selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. It seems there's no way to get rid of this selfishness on your own without his aid, is how they say it. And one day it occurred to me, of course, self can't reduce self because it's focused on self, trying to reduce self. Yeah. And so we must have his help. And then it's inevitable that I can't do it. Maybe he would or has already. How about that? I love this line that says, he gives us what we need if we stay close to him and perform his work well. And that makes it possible to say just right. How do you know? Because it's happening. And he gives me what I need. He knows what I need. I don't know what I need. I think I need a Tesla, He thinks I need to be right here, right now. Oh, man. So how do we do that? And then the rest of the steps, I believe, 4-step inventory, forming a partnership with somebody that you can talk and tell the truth, or a whole bunch of somebodies. 6 and 7, I really do want these things removed, and it seems like I have no power to do that. And because I don't know the difference between always what's loving and kind. You brought that up, Tom, this idea of truth without kindness or truth without love can be brutality. Yes. So, well, I'm telling you the truth that, there I'm practicing that principle. No, you're using it to attack that person. So, So anyway, this whole idea that we must get this ego deflation at depth, I think, is how the old timers now I am one, but older than me even, that said, That's what we're looking for here is ego deflation at death. It doesn't have to go away. We just got to deflate it. Quit paying so much attention to it. It's got a very limited agenda, and that is to keep you in self-esteem, keep you safe, get all your dreams to come true, and to have perfect personal and sex relations. So it's a very limited agenda. It's got nothing to do with I want to live happy, joyous, and free in the awareness that God's already given me all I need. So that comes to me in that part of the reading on the third step, and appreciate you bringing that up. I find that fascinating. So probably no one else does, but I do. So.
No, I love that. David, do me a favor. Share with us. I believe you shared it the last time you was on the show, but I want to hear this story again. And Tom and me were talking about it not too long ago when your wife told you so y'all had gotten into her or whatever, and she was like, "Had you done? Could you have done any better than that? You would have." That story.
Yeah,
Yeah, will you
yeah.
share that with us? I love that story.
Yeah, yeah. It actually started out with my son. He's been in trouble since he was 10 years old. He first met the police at 10. Grew up in a totally sober house. Both Heidi and I have been sober longer than he's been alive. He was aware there was a parade of people coming through our house. He knew about AA, wanted nothing to do with AA. And he came home drunk one night. He had stolen my car. He climbed out his window, stole my car, came into the house. He had the keys in his hand. And I said, I was so furious. It was like 2 a.m. I'd woken up. I didn't know why. I was standing in the window. I saw him. He was stumbling around. And I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he goes, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "You've been drinking and driving my car." And he goes, "I have not." I go, "You got the keys right there." He goes, "That wasn't me." And he went to bed, and I woke Heidi up. It's the middle of the night. And she said, "Let's talk about it tomorrow and the next day." I said, "What are we going to do? I just want to kill him." And she said, "David, if he could do better, he would do better." And a couple of years later, she and I were having a conversation. It was getting pretty tense, and I said some things I shouldn't have said. And the next morning, I knew I needed to make amends, and I couldn't wait to do that. But yeah, this was just a couple of years ago, too. So it wasn't like this was new stuff. We've been married 37 years now, but and I said, "I'm really sorry for the way I treated you." And she said, "David, if you could do better, you would do better." And I thought, oh my God, I really married above my station. So, yeah.
But David, you left out the part where she said, "You mean when you hurt my feelings?"
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, okay. If that's the way you're going to put it, yes, I'm sorry for that too.
Wow, man, that's good. The grace, right? Just the grace. I tell you what really helps me with that is when I really go into like the idea of like, man, could you just imagine like all the crazy stuff that I get away with, like from God, right? Like He just loves me. It's just constantly. What really changed me and all that stuff was when I started getting into some of the parable stories, like the prodigal son. Some of those stories where I was just like, wow, like just the power that comes from this, right? The grace from this loving Father. And Rohr talks about the Trinity, the Trinitarian, that love, just that relationship. What's blocking that from flowing, right? And man, that's just a game changer, really. And that's what the steps really have done for me was just like it gives you a process to find out like how you're blocked, right? It's like how are you blocked, how self showing up, right? And just thank God for that. Thank God.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that I made it as long as I did
Yeah,
because it's gotten better and better. So
nice, nice.
thanks for the opportunity to be here and share some of that stuff,
Yeah,
Paul.
yeah, appreciate y'all. Appreciate y'all. Before we wrap it up, y'all have anything else you want to share?
I do, because it came back to me, the thing that David had tweaked in me that I wanted to just mention. David had said, I was lucky, that this stuff happened, and I get that. Um, you know, what I have done, and this has helped with this thing of like continuously, knowing that there is a loving presence, a benevolent force that was always trying to help me and still is and will never stop. Okay. and and I was having lunch with Mary Thayer. This is about 3 or 4 years ago, and I said, MT, I said, I've been thinking about all the people that arrived in my life exactly when they should, and like that, and you're one of them. I said, I met you when I was 3 years sober, and if I hadn't, I don't know. And she said, it's like there's a blueprint for our life, but we can't see it until the structure is built. And Bazant's always quotes. He doesn't quote it. He just says it. We live our lives forward, but we understand them backwards. Right? Soren Kierkegaard was the guy that first said that. But anyway, so what I've been doing is looking back in my life, like way before I drank and all that, and thinking of the people that I met and had to meet and the things that happened. And there were some untoward, some things that I thought were pretty funky that happened, back in the day. But when I really get honest, it's like if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have learned this lesson. And if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have met this person. And so in my, I didn't believe I could get sober. It wasn't that I didn't want to. I just didn't think it was possible, because I had attempted so many times in so many ways, and I just gave up on the idea. But I went into a treatment center because Juanita wanted me to, and I needed R&R, man. I was just so damn tired of the way I'd been living. And I thought, maybe I can, relax, get some R&R, and then go back, and maybe I'll do it better. Maybe I'll still drink, but I won't, screw up the way I have. Anyway, so I go into a treatment center not having any kind of faith that I could get sober as a result of that. And AA found me there. And these two guys specifically, two Chicano guys that were exactly what I needed when I needed them. I wouldn't have listened to anyone else. I'd gone to AA meetings in Santa Fe, and I thought it was too damn white, So anyway, so these guys show up, right? And they're exactly what I need, exactly when I need it. And they lit a fire for me for Alcoholics Anonymous. I go back to Santa Fe. I'm a meeting makers make it guy, and I get a sponsor who years later, a year later, I was kind of resentful towards him because he wasn't a step worker, right? He worked up to the third step, and that was it. But what I realized looking back on it was he was exactly what I needed. He had me call him every night for 6 months. And I got to tell you guys, I was out of my gourd for 6 months, for longer, for 2 years I was. But, I would call him with crazy stuff, and he'd say, dude, that's crazy. You don't want to act on that. And he cared for me enough to listen to me night after night after night. He showed me love. So he was the perfect guy. And then at a year sober, he said, look, you're doing good. If you want to work more steps, you need to find somebody else, because, I can't, I'm not going to. I don't do it, and I'm not going to. And so I picked a guy that sounded good at meetings. He turned out to be absolutely crazy. I don't know if you've heard the stories, Dave. I'm not going to get into it, but he was really nuts. He was really, told me to leave Juanita and a bunch of real crazy stuff. And so after a year, I parted ways with him. And what I learned from him was that just because you sound good at meetings doesn't mean that you're living this way of life, or that you've got your head on straight, And then I went for 2 years without a sponsor. And what I learned from that was a guy like me almost drinks when he doesn't have a sponsor, right? But I learned that lesson. Then I met Mary Thayer at a little meeting, and she became a mentor to me and later became my sponsor. And she saved my life. She absolutely saved my life, and has continuously. Anyway, she's the one who had me call David on that fifth step thing. anyway, so she took me for she introduced me to the steps at depth in the big book. She introduced me to all sorts of stuff, and was just a loving presence in my life, and a very, very wise individual. And our chance meeting was so bizarre. I mean, it just shouldn't even have happened. It was a little nothing meeting up in Milwaukee where I live, and she happened to go to it. I happened to go to it. We became friends. Later, she sponsored Juanita, which she still does. But so I was telling her this. It's like these points at which I intersected with the exact right person. So she fired me because I didn't get a man the way I'd promised her I would, and I got Mickey for 6 months or 9 months or something. And he taught me a really valuable lesson, which is do what you say you're going to do, or suffer the consequences. There was no other way to learn that. I mean, it was so invaluable. And we stayed friends, and then. And so I'm adrift, and I'd known Don, and I'd really loved Don, and I asked Don if he'd sponsor me, and he was really the teacher for my lifetime. He was my mentor, and so I had 8 years with Don, and it was at just the right time, man. And there's dozens of stories, but anyway, when Don died, I was devastated when Don died. It was like my grandfather had died or something. I mean, it just really sent me for a loop. So he died in March, and that July, I ran into Gary Brown, who I'd known, and he'd known me, and I asked him to sponsor me. And it was at Silver Creek, and we just were passing in the hall kind of thing. And, oh, Gary, how are you? And we talked, and finally I asked him if he'd sponsor me. He sponsored me for 19 years, And then, Gary started to get dementia and stuff, and started to, slow down and stuff. And I prayed to know who I should be talking to. And that's how Tim Highland came up. And, and it's been a good fit. I mean, I believe he loves me and I love him. And each one of them was different, but they all came in right at the right time. And all the experiences that I needed to have to learn the lessons that I needed to learn all happened at the right time. And so I believe it's, what Don Major used to call divine intervention, or divine appointment. And I am honestly and truthfully, with everything in me, believe that that's what happened to me, and that's because that benevolent force was always looking out for me. And finally, I allowed it to do what it was always trying to do. I didn't stand in the way of it, and what a blessing. That thing of, being grateful for cancer. And I really am, because it's brought me and Juanita much closer. And I never knew how much she loved me till this came down. But I was driving into Santa Fe, and I was going, oh, I've got to do, chemo. Oh, poor me. I was going through that. And then this thought occurred. I thought, my God, you are privileged to get chemo. You know how many people, die because they don't have this stuff that they're giving to you? And it changed the whole thing. It was like, thank you, God, that I am privileged to receive this medicine that is saving my life. You know what I mean? And the whole thing flipped, and I've never gone back to boo, hoo, And it's just, there's more and more of that, and I'm so grateful for it. I really am. And anyway, the guys I sponsor, I don't try to. What's the right word for it? I don't control isn't the right word, because I know I can't control shit. But I don't try to oversee and manipulate their step experience anymore. You know what I'm saying? It's like I go, ooh, they're getting off the rail there. Maybe they need to get off the rail. You know what I'm saying? And it's just a better way to live, man. And I am so grateful. I'm grateful for both of you guys. I really love you, Paul. You're doing good work. You really are. And David knows how much I love him. So
Thank you so
If I talk
much.
about that, I'll start crying. So
Yeah, and thank you all so
blessing.
much. Yeah, I was blessed to have like my first sponsor was the guy that like what you are talking about, the just right guy. He was every time we had a conversation, he never once like fed into my BS. You know what I mean? He was never like, you know what, you're right, screw her. You know what I mean? He was always like the just right guy. So since the beginning, I remember the first time he ever really talked to me about prayer. He was like, help and thank you, just help. He was like, you don't need to tell God how to do his job. Anything you ask for in life right now is probably horrible for you, right? So don't ask for it. And then y'all are just talking about Mickey. I'll tell you that there's something special about that man. Like every time I was listening to a workshop that him and Marie did last week, and I was listening to it on the channel, and man, like every time that there's something about his voice, it just settles me, calms me. And I'm trying to get a hold of Mary and Marie. I called I called both of them last week trying to get them on the show. So if you all talk to either one of those ladies, please get them in touch with me because I'm trying to get Mary T and then Marie. So, all right, y'all, thank you so much. And this has been awesome. And we will schedule another date and do this again. This has been always a pleasure speaking to the OGs.
Oh, jeez.
Thanks, guys.
I'm going to take that as a compliment.
That's a compliment.
As my mother used to say, it wouldn't behoove me to take it any other way.
Yeah, the triple OGs. Yeah, appreciate it, guys.
Love you guys.
Love you guys.
Love you guys.
Yeah.
Talk soon. David, I'm sorry I didn't call you. I've just been doing chemo and I've been, but I'll talk
Really
soon.
cool. No worries.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Hello, and welcome back to Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast, where we explore the ongoing journey of recovery and the spiritual growth that comes with it. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and